Hello, everybody. It is time for playoff baseball. Finally, it's been a couple years since we've had playoff baseball in the spring, and we're going to talk about the regions, specifically Class A regions coming up on Saturday. Today, I'm joined by Greg Dean. Greg Dean follows baseball. He's watched almost every one of these teams this year, and I asked him to be on. And Greg, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and how much baseball you've watched this year.
Well, thanks, Jason. Looking forward to the conversation. I live in Pierre. I have been fortunate enough to help out on the local KCCR radio broadcasts. KCCR broadcasts every one of the Pierre High School and Post-State Legion games, and so I've been working with John Winkler, the sports director here, for the last couple of years, and have been fortunate in the fact that I have been able to see just about all of the Class A teams this year, and it's going to be a fun year. I mean, this is going to be a fun playoff run, just because there are so many good teams, and everybody is there's a lot of balance this year, probably more so than what I can remember for any number of years.
I mean, there's been years where Roosevelt's really good, or Brandon Valley's really good, or even, Pierce had some really good teams, and they come in and kind of are the favorites. And this year, as good as Lincoln's been as the number one seed coming in, anything could happen, right, Greg?
Well, and I've told a number of people over the years, you get into a 7-inning single elimination tournament, and you run into one hot pitcher or have one bad inning, and you can find yourself on the sidelines really quick. And that's the beauty of high school baseball in South Dakota.
All right, let's dig into it a little closer. We'll look at the first region. This features, so Class A, by the way, seeds everybody 1 through 16. There's 15 teams this year, so the number one seed gets a bye, and they play it out 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, and so on. And then so the 8, 9, and the 16, which there is no 16, are in the first region. And the first region is Lincoln at number 1, and then O'Gorman and Mitchell are the 8, 9 teams. And let's first of all just talk a little bit about these 3 teams, and then we'll get into any potential matchups. Let's start with Lincoln, Greg. This is a team that at the beginning of the year, I poll all the coaches, and we kind of do a top 5. This was the toughest year to do a top 5 because we were missing last year. We had some pieces from the summer to kind of understand some of the potential, but I think Lincoln has exceeded coaches' expectations the most of any team this year.
Yeah, and we had a chance to see Lincoln just last weekend, and I'll tell you, they're a solid team. I mean, they're very fundamental. They do a lot of things right. They got a lot of speed. Ryan Hammerstrom is probably one of the fastest kids I've seen on a high school baseball field in a long time. I mean, he can even make a routine ground ball a challenge for an infielder. So Lincoln is really. I mean, there's no surprise that they're the number one seed, and then they've got some really solid pitching. And I think the thing you'll hear as you hear from the coaches later on is the teams that have had success really are the ones that have good pitching and good fielding. I mean, it's the old baseball adage: if you can catch the ball and throw the ball, you're going to win a lot of ball games. And I think that's the common thread this year, that there's some good offensive teams, but the ones that are at the top of the seed chart are the ones that can catch and throw.
Exactly. And that's the theme we see over and over again, especially in spring baseball with the wood bats. You got to be able to field the ball, and you have to have more than one pitcher to get through these regions. Usually Lincoln has the advantage of having the first game off, or is it an advantage? I don't know. They don't get to play that first game. And the other team's going to be loosened up and ready to go. But they only have yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Like I said, in some ways, to me, this is the most intriguing region, just because of the fact that Lincoln only has to play that one game. So they get to save their ace, for whoever comes out of that Mitchell O'Gorman game. And then to me, the biggest decision, and where a lot of this region is gonna turn is does Sioux Falls O'Gorman throw Reese Arbogast in game 1 against Mitchell, or do they try to go with a Sam Stukel or a TJ Free or somebody against Mitchell and save Arbogast for a potential championship game against Lincoln? Because Arbogast is probably one of the top 2 or 3 pitchers in Class A baseball. And so, I mean, to me, this is, even though it's the smallest region, it's probably the most intriguing just because of that fact.
Yeah, let's move on right to O'Gorman before we hear from Jordan Johnson. Let's talk about that O'Gorman team. This is a team that's really tested themselves this year. They've had trouble with the bats once in a while, but the one thing that they have depended on, and you mentioned it, is Reese Arbogast is winning them games, and he's pitching the tough games too. He's lost a couple really close ones. But then Sam Stukel, another pitcher who's been outstanding. He's an overpowering pitcher and actually leads the team in strikeouts per inning this year with 1.5 strikeouts per inning. So, with those two guys at the top, you got to feel pretty good playing against a team like Mitchell, which is a good all-around team, but doesn't really have that cream on the pitching staff.
Yeah, and I think that's been kind of the Achilles heel for Mitchell this year, is just that, they've kind of been up and down all year. I mean, they've played good at times, and there's been other times when you just kind of scratch your head and go, what's going on there? Because you kind of expect based upon how they played at times that they just haven't been able to put it together on a consistent run. And so again, I really look at this region and just say, I think you can kind of roll the dice, because if you end up getting a couple of good pitching performances out of Mitchell, which they certainly have the potential to do, they could run the table. So I think Lincoln is likely the favorite in this region. But you certainly can't count out O'Gorman, and I wouldn't even count out Mitchell, because I think they've got the potential to win 2 games on Saturday.
Right. Mitchell's record, not necessarily the best they've had in recent years, but they've beaten Lincoln this year. They've beaten some good teams, and Brookings and teams that they can hang with. Jake Helleloyd has been one of the pitchers that's really stood up when they've needed a big performance. So, I think if they can get a few runs across and not make errors, they can definitely play with an O'Gorman who's been up and down as well. So that's your first game of the day. And then the second game will be at Field 1 in Harbiden for the 1:30 title game. And that will be, Lincoln against the winner of that O'Gorman-Mitchell game. But before we get into a little preview of what that game might be, let's hear from Lincoln's coach, Jordan Johnson, who, they don't have a huge pop on offense, but they've got a little bit of slugging in the middle of that lineup as well.
As we don't really hit for a ton of power, I would say, but then we'd come out in some games and we'd have 3-4 doubles. So I mean, it's just kind of been consistency is the biggest thing. We played very clean baseball for the most part, and we've given ourselves chances to win games, and that's also been a tribute to our pitching too. Our pitching's kept us in games. I call them our big three. They don't blow you away with strikeouts, like a Harrisburg team or whatever, but throwing strikes and being in the game and attacking hitters, and then relying on our defense has led to a lot of success for us. So it's been good.
Jordan definitely has himself a good team. A lot of team speed, like you said. They've got pitchers. They got the big 3, he calls them, 3 guys that they feel like they can go to in any situation. So I don't know if they even have an ace, but they've got 3 guys. If anybody's, not pitching on the top of their game, he knows there'll be a short leash in that game. And I don't know. They get to host either Mitchell or O'Gorman. Any comments on either one of those matchups, Greg, that intrigues you?
Well, and I think if you look at the top 3 pitchers that Lincoln can roll out, you've got Nick Lounsbury, Ethan Barron, Chase Houselog, and then if they have to go deeper, you can go to a Ty Schaefer, and
who leads their team in ERA, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely, and so if you can go down to and you hate to call him a number 4 guy, but Schaefer has 24 innings, 9 games, mainly been a reliever, but a 0.58 ERA. I mean, so you look at the depth of that pitching staff, and you don't have to put up a lot of runs if you're Lincoln. I mean, and so with their team speed, you have to look at them as the favorite. But again, you boot a couple balls, and all of a sudden, things start going south on you, and you just never know. I mean, I like Lincoln's chances coming out of this region, but again, I think anything can happen, and I'm going to be really intrigued watching the scoreboard on Saturday to see what happens with these 2 games.
Lincoln has played Mitchell twice this year. They split those 2 games. Both were fairly close. Lincoln played O'Gorman, I believe. I was going to check this for sure, but I think they played him just once. and O'Gorman had the lead. Lincoln came back and got the win in a late game. So you're right. I think Lincoln's the favorites here, but wow, if for some reason O'Gorman would go with Stuckel in game 1 and be able to get by and had Reese Arbogast in game 2, wow, that really changes things for me.
It really does for me too. I mean, you look at Arbogast's numbers. I mean, he's 4-2 on the year. You alluded to the fact that they've kind of picked him to throw the big games, and so he's had a couple of losses. But I know at least in one of them, it was because of a couple of unearned runs, and that's been a little bit of an Achilles heel for O'Gorman. I mean, they've had 57 errors in 28 games, so they're committing about 2 errors a game, and if they can cut that down and be clean in the field, hand the ball to a couple of their horses on the mound. They come in as the number 8 seed, but they're as scary as any team in this field.
I'm really looking forward to that one. That'll be the first one done. The other 3 regions will have their championship games slated for 4:00. And let's talk about the second pod, I guess. It's not really a pod, but it's the 2, the 15, and then the 7 and the 10. That'll be Roosevelt, Douglas, Washington, and Sturgis. This one will be out at Harmon Field as well in Sioux Falls. Let's start by just talking a little bit about each of these teams, or especially the contenders. We'll start with Roosevelt. Roosevelt came into the year with a lot of potential. They had more kids out for baseball than they've ever had. It's really tough just to get innings on this team. And, especially in the last couple of weeks, this team has really come to life. What makes this team dangerous, Greg?
Well, I think the biggest thing is they're just really athletic. And when Pierre played them in a doubleheader a couple of weeks ago, they just looked very fundamental. I mean, they did all the little things right, and I think that's the thing that probably sets them apart. I mean, if you look at the fact they've got 5 losses to South Dakota Class A teams, but 3 of them are 1-run losses, and in 4 of those losses, they've either been shut out or held to 1 run. And so again, if you run into that dominant pitcher that can shut down those Roosevelt bats, the other team gives themselves a chance. But again, Roosevelt really is just solid from top to bottom. And you look at, they've got a really deep pitching staff too. I mean, you throw out Charlie Jensen and Ben Earsfeld and Camden Gadboy and Cam Jones and Marcus Phillips. I mean, again, in a 2-game day, basically it's a double header is what you come down to. My theory has always been, if you can get 2 good starters and 2 good relievers, you got a good chance in playoff baseball in South Dakota. So I think Roosevelt is certainly set up to potentially, come out of this region. But again, I think this is a region where you look at somebody like Sioux Falls, Washington, who's been up and down all year, and I think for a variety of reasons. But they go to Brookings on Monday night and sweep a really good Brookings team. Mm-hmm. And so, they're coming out of that doubleheader and coming into Saturday probably with a whole bunch of momentum on their side.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think this is going to be a phenomenal group. I think Roosevelt is a team, like you said, very much pitching depth. And even at the beginning of the year, Eric DeYoung was like, yeah, we got a lot of depth, but I don't know who's going to come to play when we need those big games in the middle and late May. And I think he's got a couple. Camden Gadboy, you mentioned him. He came up big against Yankton, threw a no-hitter just last week in a shutout. I think they've got some guys they feel like that can win playoff baseball games. And then you mentioned, Marcus Phillips. He hasn't pitched a ton of innings this year, but I think he throws it harder than anybody in the state. And they've got him. If you need a couple relievers, he's the guy who can come in at the end of a game and really change the pace on the mound too.
Yeah, I saw some Twitter video from probably 6 weeks ago or so that had him on the gun at 90 plus. I mean, those are some big numbers for a 17-year-old to be throwing out there. So when you've got that kind of arm at the back end of your rotation, again, I mean, that makes a lot of coaches sleep better at night if you got that kind of horse to go to.
Exactly. So their first game, they play a team that's 1-17 in Douglas. And, this is a team that has been building over the years and has had trouble containing a lineup or continuing a lineup year after year. We don't expect this to be much of a game. but Douglas will make the trip and go against Roosevelt. And then in game 2, I think Sturgis is maybe one that people don't know about quite as much. That, they've played some good games this year, and they've been in some close games. I think Sturgis is a team that did well out west, and a team that Washington probably doesn't know a whole lot about. I don't think they're going to win this one, but they've played close with some decent teams this year.
Yeah, and they have been the best West River team, and because of that, they're probably a little bit of an unknown. They have played a few games against some of the East River teams, but they are I think they're probably the best team that everybody else knows the least about. But they've got some good athletes on this team. You look at a David Anderson and a Ridge Inhofer, Owen Cass, RJ Andrzejewski, and then the Olsen boys, Caden and Kelton. And they've got some solid baseball players. And so Sturgis is the kind of team that you can't go to sleep on, because if you look past them, they can rise up and take you down. I mean, they were in Pierre a little over a week ago and played the Govs to a pair of, they lost both ends of the doubleheader, but it was 8-6 and 4-0. I mean, so it was two really solid games from Sturgis. So, kind of the sense I get is that they can hit the ball pretty well. And if they can get some pitching, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Let's talk about Washington a little bit. This is a team that hasn't really been able to power the ball a lot this year, but they get on, they make things happen. And they've got two guys at the front of their pitching staff who have been pretty much lights out. Tyler Boyum and Gabe Sharping give them a chance to win each time those guys go on the mound. So, they've got two big guys at the top. They've got some depth in their lineup. They've had a lot of close games this year, and the record doesn't show it, but they can play with anybody in the state, right, Greg?
Absolutely. I mean, and they anytime you throw Tyler Boyum or Gage Sharping out on the mound, from what I've seen looking at the box scores, they give themselves a chance to win, and because they can go deep into just about any start that they have, and then they've got a guy like Andrew Evenson who can come out of the bullpen and be that back end guy. And so I look at Washington as, again, maybe not being the headliner of this region, but certainly a team that's going to be right there, I think, come the end of the day. And again, it's all going to be about who makes plays. I mean, who's going to make plays, who's going to get that crucial hit, who's going to make that play in the field. And again, I would not be at all surprised if even though Roosevelt goes in as the favorite in this region, if Washington or even Sturgis comes out of this region, I would not at all be shocked.
Well, we've talked a little bit about these four teams. Let's talk about the favorites once again. Eric DeYoung, their head coach, talks a little bit about his team's makeup and their chances to have some success.
I think we got some things figured out, but it's gonna come down to kind of like we were a few years ago. We're gonna have to be effective on defense. We got to throw strikes. I don't see us scoring 10 runs a game, so we just got to stick to fundamental baseball, and that's what we're gonna preach, and that's what we're not gonna get too greedy or press. But if we throw strikes and if we play defense, we're going to be a good team. But if we can't do those things, we could be really struggling.
Eric DeYoung has done a great job coaching these Roosevelt Rough Riders, and they've gotten better and better as the years gone on. But we're probably staring at, we're not going to dismiss Sturgis yet, but we're probably staring at a Roosevelt-Washington rematch for a chance to go to state. If that is the case, they've played two really close games this year, including an extra inning game that was a tremendous game that you could go either way. Anything about this matchup that strikes you, Greg?
Well, I think Roosevelt maybe comes in as maybe the hottest team in South Dakota. They've won 15 of their last 16, and they've played a number of close games. And again, I think it comes down to, a Roosevelt team that's just very fundamental, does all the right things, and very athletic. And so if they can do what they have done over the last month to 6 weeks, again, you likely look at them as the favorite. But again, and I don't know who Washington is going to throw in game 1 or game 2, whether it's Boyum or Sharping. I think you'd have to be comfortable with either one of them. If it comes down to a Roosevelt Washington game, and one of those guys gets hot for Washington, it could be, this could be a 1-0, 2-0, 2-1 kind of game. And again, it all comes down to who gets the big hit at the right time.
Exactly. Sharping, by the way, 0.90 ERA, a little better ERA than Boehm. Boehm has pitched a couple more innings. Boehm's a little bit more overpowering as far as the strikeouts go, and a little better on controlling his walks. But specifically, he's had success against Roosevelt this year. In just Boehm's 2 games against Roosevelt, 8 innings pitched, given up just 1 run and 3 hits, and he struck out 35 batters in his last 3 appearances. So I would lean toward, not looking past Sturgis. You definitely have a guy like Sharping to go out there against Sturgis, but I think it's probably Sharping and then save Boehm for the Roosevelt game. But you're right, they're fine either way if whatever they choose.
Yeah, and again, it just speaks to the balance of 1 through 8, 1 through 9, 1 through 10. Even we haven't talked about Yankton yet, but again, I think you can even go down as far as maybe even 11 this year, and I mean, it can be a scary year if you're a top seed.
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be a lot of fun. That pod 2 will be at I call it pod 2. It's not really a pod, but it's going to be at Harmon. And that will be the late game again. Weather, you never know how the weather is going to treat if the times change a little bit, but it'll be about 4 o'clock for that game to punch their ticket to state. Let's move on to a group that you know a little bit about, Greg. You watch a lot of Pierre baseball. Pierre is in with the same group as Rapid City Central, Brandon Valley, and Yankton. And Pierre is a team that gets to host this regional. First of all, what does that mean for Pierre to be able to host a regional in playoff baseball?
Well, and I think the biggest advantage that Pierre has in being able to host is they're really good at home, and this is a community that really supports not only athletics as a whole, but especially baseball. I mean, at just about any Pierre high school game, post-8 game, I mean, you're going to have a couple of hundred people in the stands. I mean, not just parents, but a good sector of the community. And it's kind of, we call them the lawn chair boys, but there's a group of guys, retired guys that come, and there's probably upwards of a dozen or 15 of them that just sit their lawn chairs up in the back row right in front of the concession stand. And they're there at every game. And I'm not just talking varsity games. They're there at the Junior Legion games and the 13, 14-year-old games. I mean, they just love baseball. And I think that just is an indication of the kind of support that this community gives not only the high school team, but the Legion teams as well.
And Hyde Stadium's a fun place to play. And it's a place that's really well respected around the state. So it's great for them to be able to host this. Let's talk about the team a little bit. They've done a great job of hitting the ball this year. They're hitting over 300 as a team. They're slugging over 400. This is a team that has been able to put the ball in play this year, right? Right, Greg?
Yeah, and I think it's really kind of led by the top 4 guys that are probably going to be the top 4 guys in the lineup. I mean, you start with Lincoln Keenholz at the top of the lineup, and he's just been hitting the ball all over the park from day one. Then you go to a couple of names that have been around high school baseball and Legion baseball for the last couple of years, and that's McGuire Rasky and Andy Gordon. And they've just been real solid in the 2 and 3 holes. And then Bennett Dean has really taken a step up this year and has moved into that number 4 spot, playing first base for the Governors. And the other thing that has really been a key for the Governors this year is that not having that year of play last year, this was a team that was real senior heavy the last 2 years. I mean, that the class of 2019 with Garrett Stout and Gray Zabel and Andrew Coverdale and some others, really, I mean, that was the class that played for not only 2019, but would have played in 2020. And then that was the bulk of the Legion roster in the summer of 2020. And so there's a lot of questions coming into this year about what kind of holes the Govs were going to have to fill. And so not only have this year's seniors stepped up, but they've gotten a lot of contributions from some of the younger guys. And I look at kids like Jaden Wiebe, who's a sophomore, who has really played well at second base. I mean, you wouldn't know if you watched him that he's a that he's a sophomore playing his first year of varsity baseball. Then you've got kids like Matthew Hansen, who actually took a year off last year from baseball to concentrate on tennis. And he's been a great athletic addition to the infield, giving him some good innings on the mound. Brecken Kruger, Jack Merkwan, Jake Mayer is another senior who's done well this year. And so, they've gotten a lot of contributions from a lot of kids who have just stepped up their game this year.
Yeah, and you need that. You need that in a year where you have so much chemistry that still needs to be built, and they have done that. One note I have to say about the lineup, Lincoln Keenholz, 500 on base percentage, like that's 50-50 chance he gets on base every time. That's ridiculous. And there's a lot of respect for Lincoln around the state, not only as a hitter, as a pitcher as well.
Yeah, and he does a lot of things really well. I mean, the like prime example, when the Govs went down to Sioux Falls a couple of weeks ago to play Sioux Falls Roosevelt, and they don't have his box score in front of me for that game, but he goes to the O'Gorman track meet same weekend as Howard Wood, goes to the track meet at O'Gorman, wins the high jump. I think he jumped 6'4" or 6'6" that day, won the long jump, and then came and really competed hard that night against Roosevelt. And if it weren't for, I think Roosevelt scored 3 in the bottom of the 5th or 6th inning, and kind of an inning that got away from the Govs. But he competed and really went toe to toe with Roosevelt that night after a big day on the jumping pads. And so I think that's just kind of the athlete that you're looking at from Lincoln Keenholz, and he's the table setter. He's the leadoff guy. Leads the team in runs scored with 29 this year. So he does a really good job of getting on base, and then sets himself up for the rest of the order to bring him around.
Let's talk about their pitching a little bit. They've spread the innings around a little bit between Brady Getz, Isaac Polak, and Lincoln Keenholz, and then Bennett Dean's done a great job of coming in relief. What can you tell us about those pitchers for the Govs?
Yeah, and again, we talked about Keenholz, and he's just been really solid. I mean, he's got an ERA of under 1, a WHIP of just over 1. He's second on the team in strikeouts. But the two guys that have quietly sort of elevated their game are Brady Getz, who's a junior, who has just kind of worked his way up through the system. Again, I think he's a kid who probably would have come in with a little more notoriety if he had gotten an opportunity to play last year at the varsity level, but actually leads the team in innings this year, leads the team in wins, leads the team in strikeouts. He's got an ERA just over 1. And when they went to Huron about a month ago, probably one of the coldest nights I've ever watched a baseball game in, because when Brady took the mound for the second game of that doubleheader, it was like 35 degrees, and he threw a 5-inning 55 pitch gem that night. I mean, it was probably one of the best performances in some of the most adverse conditions I've ever been around watching baseball in this state, and I think that's the kind of competitor that Brady Getz is. And then you got a young man by Isaac Polak, who's just again hasn't gotten a lot of notoriety, but has just stepped up, second on the team in innings. He leads the team in appearances. Again, he's got an ERA of about 1.5, and he's just kind of a deceptive guy. He's not going to overpower you, but everything that he throws moves, and so he's just a great complement to Getz and Keenholz. If he comes in behind those guys, he's really just a really nice compliment, and gives you just a way different look than what the other two guys give you.
A lot of great players on that Pierre team, and they get, I believe, Rapid City Central right in the game. And yep. Rapid City Central is a team, again, just haven't been able to put a lot of wins together. They rely on Kyle Schluter to give them as many innings as possible. Caden Jones, another guy who can pitch for them, but haven't had a lot of depth on the pitching staff, and they don't have a lot of depth in the lineup.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest challenge for for both of the Rapid City high school teams as well as St. Thomas More, is that since post 22 and post 320 have said, if you're going to play for us, we want you in our facilities working out in the spring. That really takes a lot of the depth away from Rapid City Stevens and Rapid City Central and St. Thomas More. And that's too bad, but that's the way those programs have made those decisions. You can't fault them for it. I mean, it is what it is. And because they want to be as good as they can working with those kids. And so it just becomes a challenge for Rapid City Central and Rapid City Stevens. And I think what you end up with is probably a lot of younger players. And I know that you got to give them a lot of credit because they've gone out and competed hard, against some of the best teams in South Dakota, and they show up every day.
Exactly. And then in the second game, we've got Yankton taking on Brandon Valley. And Brandon Valley, let's touch on them a little bit. This is a team that's played a lot of games. They got out early in the spring, went to Kansas, tested themselves, and just they played over 30 games this year. And I think they really started to turn the corner about the middle of the season. They started doing a little bit better job of fielding, and they've started doing a little bit better job of not getting so many walks. They had a lot of problems with walks earlier this year.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing that from what I've seen of Brandon is can they get that pitching? Because they can certainly hit the ball. I mean, they hit the ball all over the field, and they're led by Joe Kolbeck, who's one of the few returning All-Staters. He was a first-team All-Stater as a sophomore, and headed to Iowa Western next year. I mean, and so you can see the talent that you have with Kolbeck. I mean, there's no secret. I mean, everybody in South Dakota baseball knows who Joe Kolbeck is. But then you bring in some kids like Matt Brown and Nick Hockenstad and Trey Sainaha and some of those other ones. And again, they're a really solid club. And Coach Jeremy Van Heel always puts a good club on the field. And so anytime that you step on the field against the Lynx, you got to bring your A game.
We're going to hear from Jeremy Van Heel. Let's just hear from him right now. He's going to talk a little bit about their season and some of the keys to success if they want to get on a little run here.
But I mean, offensively, we stepped up. I mean, we got hot when we had like a stretch there where we were going to have 12 away games. And then we played Mitchell, and then we went to Rapid City, and then we played those teams. And then the guys started slowing the game down and hitting the ball well. And then some guys were like, okay, this is how we play baseball. And then we got going. Yeah, I mean, this weekend, Saturday, it's going to be fun. I mean, it's going to be Woodbat High School baseball, and whoever's going to make the first mistake is going to be the one that's going to be chasing up. I mean, trying to catch up.
So yes, Brandon Valley, a team that has really turned the corner. I think at the middle point of the season, they started winning some games. They feel like they're one of the top 4 teams, but they know they've got a tough road to state. Not only having to play Yankton that first round, which is a team that's very young. Let's talk about Yankton a little bit. This is a team that I think has potential. They just haven't quite got enough horses in the barn to get this thing done.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the key fact with Yankton is that they are very young. But again, they've got a couple of really solid pitchers. Pierre played them in Sioux Falls a couple of weeks ago, and Sam Kampshoff really threw well. I think Pierre ended up winning that game 4-1, but Kampshoff kept him in that game and really threw well. And then you got a kid like Tristan Redmond. I think there's a Llewellyn who's and that's a name that is a Yankton baseball name and has a lot of track record behind them. But if you look at their schedule, I think they're only 6-21. But they've played some really close games against just about every team that's at the top of the seed points, and whether it's Roosevelt or Brandon or Pierre or Harrisburg or whoever, they've been right there. And again, I think when you're right there, if you find a way to break through, again, this is, even though they're seeded number 11, I don't think you can go to sleep on this Yankton team.
Yeah, Yankton with a couple of young Rikens up at the top of the lineup. Dylan Prouty's young, and he's in the middle of that order. They really try to just generate runs the best they can, but I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, they played a low-scoring game with Roosevelt. They played a low-scoring game with a couple games with Mitchell that they were right in until the end. I think this is a team that can hang, and I know Jeremy Van Heel is not taking them for granted. He said that to us. So I think that will be an interesting game to start it off. But if we do get a Pierre Brandon Valley game, the top seeds. I think we're going to have a good one. One scheduled game this year got rained out, so they don't know a lot about each other.
Right, and I think unfortunately weather may come into play again on Saturday. Right now the forecast looks like there's a 40 to 50% chance of rain on Saturday afternoon, and then going to as high as 70% Saturday night. So and then we've got graduation on Sunday, so that throws out the possibility of if those games get rained out, in all likelihood, they might end up getting pushed to Monday. And so, that would be unfortunate, but it's not unheard of in playoff baseball in the state.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit about Brandon Valley's pitching staff. Caleb Zur, Carson Axtell, two guys that they've relied on, and Joe Kolbeck has really stepped up. He's played shortstop this year. A couple years ago, we saw him at third base a lot, but he's also been very much improved on the mound. So they got three guys they can really depend on if they get to that game where they need to make it to state.
Yeah, and again, I think it kind of comes down to how far do they get tested by Yankton in the first game? I mean, can you get a complete game from whoever they throw out there, whether it be Kolbeck or Zur or Askdahl or whoever? Do you have some extra arms to go into that championship game against likely Pierre? I mean, you hate to say that, but yeah. How deep is your bullpen going into that game? So whoever your starter is, again, and I think every coach on Saturday is going to have a really short leash for their starting pitchers, because if they get in any kind of challenge, any kind of a problem, whether it's, Lincoln at number one all the way down to the bottom, the seed points, I mean, you just can't let a game get out of hand. And so I think you're going to be on a real short leash.
It should be, if that is the matchup, Brandon Valley and Pierre, that should be one of the best games that we see to punch your ticket to get to state. Let's move on to the fourth and final region that we have here, and some really interesting matchups coming up. Harrisburg, Huron, Brookings, and Rapid City, Stevens. Let's start by talking about Harrisburg. I've had a chance to see them a couple times this year, and I'm just impressed with their lineup, with their fielding, with their pitching staff. This is a team that's really started to put things together this year, Greg.
Yeah, and they're a scary team, because they can mash the ball. They probably hit the ball harder than anybody else in this playoff field. I mean, you heard, if you look at their stat line, they can hit the ball all over the field. They got like 84 extra base hits this year through the season. They got 14 home runs. I mean, you'd have to go back and look, but I think if you added up all the home runs from all other 14 teams, you might not get to 14 home runs. And you've got some kids like Timon Long. I think he's got 6 home runs on the year. Jack Sutton's got 2. He hit a walk-off home run to win a game earlier this year. Tyson Kogel's got 3. But what you notice about Harrisburg, at least offensively, is they really grind at bats, and that's really important in a playoff setting where pitch count is so important, because they're kind of I don't want to call them an all or nothing team, but they walk a lot and they strike out a lot. So they really run your pitchers deep into counts. And when you do that, you just drive up those pitch counts, and you get into the back end of bullpens pretty quickly. And so not only are they very good offensively, but they can, if they get behind the way that with their power, they can make up runs in a real hurry.
Exactly. This is a team, I think, that it's hard to find a weakness. They've really improved in all those areas. And they play a team in Huron. Huron's a team, again, that they've had a few games where they've been really close, and they've had a few games they just let go. They just don't have a lot of depth on the pitching staff. But in a one-game scenario, again, who knows? I mean, they're 5-20 this year. And, as a team, they've hit 236, so they haven't really got that together. But they've had some spurts where they've really shown they can make something happen.
Yeah, and they've got a couple of decent pitchers. We saw them when the Govs went over to Huron on that really cold night about a month ago, and they got a young man, I think the name Johnny Hernandez, yep, who's really solid on the mound. And again, if he's on his A game and can keep Harrisburg off balance, Again, you just never know. I mean, on paper, this looks like a Harrisburg likely is the favorite, but again, you give the ball to Hernandez in any given day, and he certainly has the ability to shut down a lineup like Harrisburg.
Yeah, Hernandez 2-0 on the year, the only starting pitcher not to have a loss for them this year, and then he's got a little trouble with his control. His walks have been a little high, but everything else looks really good. A 2.68 ERA, and he struck out 39 guys in just 28 innings. So I think that's definitely the guy they're gonna tab for their game one to try to advance to game two. On the other side, we've got a lot of fun. We've got Brookings, a team that Ryan Bauer told me at the beginning of the year they're going to be sneaky good, and they have been. They've been good with very deep pitching staff, and they've been able to hit a little bit this year as well. Greg, what do you think about Brookings?
Oh, and they're really solid. When they came to Pierre, I think it was 3 weeks ago, it was a pair of games that was probably two of the best high school baseball games you'd want to sit down and watch, even if you're not a fan of either team. Just as a casual fan. First game was Pierre won 2-1 on a Jaden Wiebe 2-run double in the bottom of the sixth. And then the next game went with 0-0 going into the eighth inning, and Gov's got a walk-off infield single from Bennett Dean to win 1-0. And it was just, those were just two really solid teams going at each other. On paper, we looked at it going in, and John Winkler, the sports director, and I said in the pregame that these were going to be two really evenly matched teams, and that's exactly what it was. And I was really impressed by Brookings that night. I mean, they're a very good offensive team. You've got kids like Jackson Krogman and Jake Amon, Cole Mollum, who really can hit the ball well, but they're really deep pitching. Their pitching staff is really deep. Mason Bevensee, we didn't get a chance to see Bevensee that night. But on paper, he's probably their best pitcher, ERA of about 2.4. But in 43 innings, they only walked 9 guys. Yeah. I mean, struck out 31. I mean, so he's got great control. And then you go to Kyle Bauer, he's 35 innings, again, ERA of a little over 2, but a whip of under 1, 33 strikeouts and only 8 walks. So again, I think if you're Ryan Bauer, I mean, I think you can roll out just about any combination of arms on Saturday, and if we end up in a championship game between Brookings and Harrisburg, and we didn't even talk about Harrisburg's pitching staff. You start and end that conversation with Will Simmons. We talked about how good Reese Arbogast is. Will Simmons may be actually even better than that. I mean, he's started 7 games this year. That's the 7 games he's thrown in, 39 innings. So he's averaging almost 6 innings a start, an ERA of 0.35 and a whip of 0.6, 86 strikeouts and 11 walks in 39 innings. I mean, those are video game numbers.
And he's won every game he started. He's 7-0.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that if you're going to hand the ball to Will Simmons, not only do you as a coach feel good, but he just elevates everybody else around him. And you just, if you're a fielder playing behind him, you just walk out onto the field with a little different air of confidence behind you.
Let's hear from the coaches. Let's hear from Kyle Bauer of Brookings, and we'll also hear from Mark Abramson of Harrisburg, and just hear what they have to say about their team's performances this year and what they're looking forward to.
We pretty much achieved all of our goals throughout the season. We came out, we pitched well. We knew we were going to have to do that. We came out, we swung it well. We've got 84 extra base hits in 32 games. So it's pretty promising to see. And then we're cutting down defensively on errors, cutting down from 2 errors last summer. Goal is really to improve that and give our pitchers some help on the mound and cut it down to less than an error and a half a game. So I think it's all good news, and I guess we'll see what lays out this next weekend and the weekend after.
It's been our go-to. We've had some really nice surprises on our pitching staff. And, really probably the number one things that helps our pitching staff more than any is a good defense. And, we've been luckily playing really well defensively.
Yeah, two teams. I think they've played each other. We talked about a potential matchup here in the second round. Brookings has to get by Rapid City Stevens, very similar to Rapid City Central, just not a very deep team, very young team. Had trouble pulling out wins. So we expect Brookings and Harrisburg to be that second matchup. Of course, anything can happen, but if it is, again, pitching matchups are going to be huge. We talked a little bit about Will Simmons, but Harrisburg also has a guy named Chase Lucas who's pitched over 30 innings and has very good numbers. They could potentially get complete games out of both of these guys. You talked about having two relievers that you need for tournaments. They might have two guys that can go the whole distance.
Yeah, I mean, Lucas is, on just about every other team in South Dakota might be the number one. Unfortunately, he's landed behind Will Simmons, and so he doesn't probably get the notoriety he deserves. But he's got an ERA of under 1 and a WHIP of just over 1, and 31 strikeouts and 31 innings. So he's striking out a batter an inning, and he's 6-0. And so, you hand the ball to Lucas, and then you've got a couple of real strong arms behind him, and Sam Rayburn and Jack Tigan. And Harrisburg, even though they're the number 4 seed,
right.
I don't think there's a lot of difference between certainly number 1 and number 4, especially if you're the Harrisburg coaching staff and you get to hand the ball to Will Simmons and Chase Lucas on any given day.
Excuse me. I couldn't agree with you more. You've got just to get to that point about not much difference between, especially those top 4 teams. You talked about Roosevelt maybe being the hottest team in the state right now. Lincoln has had, earned a number 1 seed overall. This Harrisburg team is the most dangerous with those two guys at the front of their rotation. I'll tell you what, and then there's a number of other teams. Pierre is one of them that has had a lot of success, and they belong definitely in that conversation. But then, Brandon Valley and Washington, we got a lot of teams that could surprise. But those top 4 teams, man, if those 4 teams make it to the state tournament, watch out. It could go any which direction, just to top on that point.
Yeah, I think just one other point. I think it's certainly a year where you could look at the outcomes of these regions come Saturday night and say it's 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the state tournament. It could be 5, 6, 7, and 8, or you may have a dark horse like a Sturgis or a Mitchell or a Yankton rise up and throw a curveball into the mix. And so I'm not going to be shocked at whatever the lineup is going into the state tournament. I just know there's going to be some really good baseball played on Saturday, and I know there's going to be some really good baseball played in Sioux Falls next weekend.
Just kind of touching on that potential Harrisburg Brookings game they've played during the season. And Brookings is a team that plays really well, especially at home, but they split with Harrisburg. So they're one of those few teams that has had some success against Harrisburg. It wasn't against either Lucas or Simmons, but they're kind of looking forward to that challenge of facing an ace here, if that ends up being the case.
Yeah, and I think if in looking at the numbers, I think if there may be one Achilles heel that Brookings has is that their errors are a little higher than probably what they should be. They've committed 58 errors in 30 games, so they're averaging about 2 a game, which for most high school clubs is not bad. But you compare that with where a number of these other teams are, and again, if you're locked in a pitcher's duel and you commit 1 or 2 errors at the wrong time, that's going to be the difference in the game.
Yeah, and on a side note, when we talked to Kyle Bauer, he said their fielding has gotten better, but especially at home, playing on that nice turf. They're going to be playing in Harrisburg where, things get a little bit more off kilter. They're not used to playing on their nice even turf. So yeah, that's definitely something to look forward to. We've gone through all the teams, Greg. Is there something in particular that you're looking forward to most about this weekend?
Well, like I said, I said a little earlier, that Sioux Falls, Lincoln, O'Gorman, Mitchell region is probably the most intriguing region to me. I mean, just because I think a lot of that region may well turn on the decision by the O'Gorman coaching staff about, do you throw Arbogast in game 1 or do you try to hold him for game 2 and go with somebody like a Sam Stukel in the first game against Mitchell. I think that's got the most intriguing region to me. I look at that second region, the Roosevelt region, with Washington and Sturgis. To me, that's the region that maybe has the best chance for a dark horse to come out of that region. You hate to call them a dark horse, even though because we know what a quality team Sioux Falls, Washington is. And like I said, you can't go to sleep on Sturgis. And then I think if you look at this Pierre region, to me, the biggest thing there is the weather going to be a factor? Are we going to end up having to go either deep into Saturday night if the rains come, or possibly get pushed into Monday? That to me will be the biggest thing there. And then I'm just looking at that last region and the likelihood of a Harrisburg Brookings championship game, assuming that comes together. I'd love to be in the stands for that one, because that could be just a real doozy.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to your guys' coverage of Pierre. You've done a great job of following those guys all season long. Greg, are you going to be doing the radio call for that this weekend?
Yeah. John Winkler and I will be doing the call for the Pierre games on KCCR AM. You can catch the stream, or you can catch the games on YouTube. Just search KCCR Sports, and John's done a great job. Young guy with a bright future in the broadcasting world, and just has really done some really good things, especially with that YouTube channel, and the way that he's really taken that up a notch with a scoreboard, and he's multitasking. He's got about 8 balls in the air on any given pitch, trying to keep all the electronics working, and I just get to sit over beside him and try to be coherent. So
well, you guys do a great job, and we appreciate every kind of coverage we can get for high school baseball, and you guys do a wonderful job with that. Just a side note, coming up next week, we will be at the Birdcage, Midco Sports Network, for the coverage of the state tournament, the state A's. And Joel Sage will be on the call with me for that. So we're really looking forward to a fun 3 games coming up next Saturday. And can't wait to see how this weekend unfolds. Greg, thank you for your time, and looking forward to a fun Saturday.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right.